If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets. This revolution is not on Facebook. This revolution is not about burning cars, but this revolution is in the mind. Because if your mind is not under your control, your body will be a tool that your oppressor will use to oppress you and to oppress your people. That is why Steve Biko said that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Peace and power, peace and blessing, freedom and light, freedom and decolonization to all African people from wherever you are. It is a pleasure, as always, from us, the African Continental Unity Party. My name is Kabbalah. I'm happy to welcome you in this weekly conversation where we discuss about things concerning us as African people in our struggle for freedom and emancipation. As you can see today from the title, I want to discuss this simple subject, Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, is it a solution or is a formula? It's very important that we understand certain concepts that we are using. What do they mean and how do we intend to use them? Because we might be confusing ourselves with different concepts that we don't understand how to utilize. That is why I want to share with you within a few minutes what is Pan-Africanism. Is it a solution or is it a formula for the solution that we need to solve the African problem? And simply, I will tell you that Pan-Africanism is a formula, but is not a solution. Let me repeat that again. Pan-Africanism is a formula to the solution that Africa needs, but Pan-Africanism itself is not a solution. So we need to have a solution and use Pan-Africanism as a formula in order to apply that solution. Just like you want to find 4. What you do, you use a formula, 2 plus 2 equals to 4. It's the same thing that we want freedom, we want power, we want economic development, we want political, whatever else that we want. But the formula to get to that condition that we want, the formula for us to obtain the results that we want is through Pan-Africanism, which is a formula. And the reason I'm saying that is because the core of Pan-Africanism, regardless of how you try to define the concept itself, but the bottom line of Pan-Africanism is unity, unity of African people. That is why we define Pan-Africanism as the agenda that aims to unite African people globally for the total liberation of Africa through scientific means. So the core message, the bottom line of Pan-Africanism is unity of African people. However, unity itself is not the solution that Africa needs. Unity is the formula, as I've just said, that Pan-Africanism is a formula. Because one thing we need to realize is that today, if we have to, for example, declare that let all the borders that we have inherited from colonialism be destroyed and Africa becomes one entity suddenly, I'm sure that tomorrow morning there will be civil war in Africa. There will be fight between people who have been, holding some kind of antagonistic tendencies towards each other. There will be war probably between Zimbabwe and South Africa. There will be war between Botswana and South Africa. There will be war between Rwanda and Congo. There will be war all over the country, or all over the continent. Because unity itself, that unity, the way that many people speak about it, of just coming together and sit together, is not the solution that Africa needs, right? Africa is in need of power. However, there are objectives, there are goals, or there are things that we need to do in order to acquire the power. And in order to do them properly, we need to utilize the formula that we call Pan-Africanism. Because through Pan-Africanism, we are able to come together and to work together and achieve the goals that we have in mind for our freedom and our emancipation. That is why I said that Pan-Africanism is not actually, or African solution is not just is not merely the unity that we talking about every day. No, unity to do something. We unite in order to do something. You see, because we can say, as I said, we can say today, let us come together. That is not going to end hunger in Africa. We can say tomorrow, let us destroy all the boundaries of colonialism and come together. That is not going to end sufferings in Africa. That is not going to create jobs in Africa. You see? However, if we come together for specific objectives, we say, let us come together and do 1, 2, 3, 4, we will be able to achieve greater results than what we can do when we are alone. I give you one example. Every year, African leaders, the elites, those who are controlling the system, or those who have been put in charge of the system by European powers, they go to Europe in private jets or medical jets to treat themselves when they are sick. And I've tried, according to the recent database or recent, statistics, each one spends at least 300,000 euros in order to go and get treatments in Europe, Belgium, or I don't know, Germany, England, wherever they can go. The recent example was the Prime Minister of Ivory Coast, who died in Germany. It costed 300,000 euros for him to be, taken to Belgium for his treatment and stuff like that. This is one single person. So that money it includes actually his staff, his medical advisors, his one of the family members, and all in all comes down to 300,000 US dollars, euros. You can imagine that's a huge amount. And this is for one person and one country. Can you imagine how many of them do go to America, go to, I don't know, Switzerland to go and get treatments? Lots of them. And can you imagine for the continent of Africa, how many do the same thing, go through the same process? However, if you take that money, you put it together, aren't we able to build some Pan-African hospitals, major hospitals in the continent? One, for example, located in West Africa, another one in East Africa, another hospital in Central Africa, another one in Southern Africa, and take some of our specialist Nigerian doctors who are in New York, bring them and come and work in these hospitals, buy all the equipments that we need. And this will then cut the cost of traveling abroad to get treatment. This will make the money to circulate in Africa. This will make the money to circulate in Africa and create more economy, and then obviously create more jobs, and then establish the conditions of African development. Let me give you another example. In 2016, all African nations spent about 42 billion US dollars in buying military equipment. African states individually, when we bring the money together, they spend equivalent of 42 billion US dollars in buying military equipments that have already been written off in France, written off in Germany, written off in Russia, in America. Old equipments that are not even capable of protecting these nations against a country like France, against a country like, I don't know, America, China, I don't know, a country like Russia. All this money, these sums of money that we spend individually to buy weapons that are not even enough to defend ourselves, right? Have been spent, all these monies have been spent only to mostly protect the head of states so that they can drive in armed vehicles and all kind of stuff. But when you look at Africa, Africa is weak, defenseless, has no power to defend itself or to defend herself against her many enemies as we know them. However, if this money, 42 billion US dollars, could have been put together for the defense not of one country but defense of Africa as a whole, we would have been on that trajectory to becoming a superpower, militarily speaking. Because one thing for sure is that the world listens to the language of power. The world does not listen to a language of diplomacy. The world does not listen to negotiation. The world does not listen to, I don't know, prayer or whatever. As long as you are powerless, you will be always dominated by those who have the power. That is why the President Putin in 2018, when he presented his recent nuclear weapon that is called Saturn II, he said something very important. He said, before you did not listen to us, now you must listen. That is what the world listens to. The world does not listen to the goodwill of African leaders. The world does not listen to a voice of a democratic leader. They don't care about whether you are democratic leader, whether you are a good leader, whether you are, I don't know, the leader who respects the rights of his citizen. They don't care about none of those things. They care about the power. When you have the power, they will listen to you. When you have the power, they will pay attention to what you say, because the language that the world listens to, especially those who actually pull the strings, in the world today, the only language they listen to is the language of power. As long as we are powerless and we show powerlessness in whatever we do, we will never gonna be listened to, and we will never gonna be respected. And when I talk about power, power can mean a lot of things, but in the context of today's reality, when we talk about power, we see one thing: the dimension of violence. The dimension of violence, or the capacity of violence. When we say that the United States is a powerful nation in the world, it's not because the United States has a culture superior to other people's culture. In fact, it's the country where people are oppressed. Mentally speaking, people are actually, overwhelmed with stress. Many of them actually put the end to their lives by themselves because they can't cope with the stress of life. So when we say America is a superpower in the world, it's not because America is a loving country. No, it's a cruelest country. We say America is a superpower because it has the capacity to inflict violence, a degree of violence on other nations. And that is the dimension of power in this period in time where we are living now. In this current dispensation, when we talk about powerful nations, are those nations who have the power to inflict violence upon other nations. That is what France is. It has the nuclear power to inflict violence on other nations. When we talk about Russia as one of the powerful nations in the world, it's because Russia has the power to inflict violence upon other nations. It's the same thing with America, with China, with England. And therefore, if Africa has to spend 42 billion US dollars, it must be to acquire power. The power which is able to raise Africa to that level of tremendous violence, because that is the nature of power today in the world. Whether you accept it or not, that's the reality. We are at our knees today because we don't have the power, because we are suffering the violence of other people. They inflict violence on us: economic violence, policy violence, military violence, and any kind of violence they are able to inflict on us because we don't have the same power to resist or to pose a kind of threat to them. So, within the formula of Pan-Africanism, we could have brought this money together and build a continental military system that will be able to protect, to defend Africa from all its enemies or all her enemies. So that is why I say that Pan-Africanism is a formula that we need at this moment to liberate and to emancipate Africa. There's no, at this moment, there's no other formula that we can implement that will be able to override, the Pan-Africanism as a formula that we have today. There's no other formula that can be, effective as the formula of Pan-Africanism. So, if we want economic power in Africa, that economic power must be planned and implemented through the agenda of Pan-Africanism. If we want, I don't know, scientific power, whether you are in Nigeria, whether you are in Ghana, whether you are in the Congo, whether you are in South Africa, that, scientific power must be planned and implemented, within the boundaries of Pan-Africanism. Because without Pan-Africanism, we don't have a chance to redeem Africa. And most importantly, we don't have a chance to free or to emancipate Africa. Every solution that we have must be implemented within the formula of Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism has the potential to bring us together so that we can work together for whichever formula we have for our liberation and emancipation. So once again, is Pan-Africanism a formula or is Pan-Africanism a solution? Pan-Africanism is a formula. So it means us as African people, we must firstly find the solution before we even come to the point of Pan-Africanism. Because most people do that mistake. Most of Pan-Africanists make a mistake of thinking that by advocating the agenda of Pan-Africanism alone is enough and Africa will be free. Africa will emancipate once we embark on the journey of Pan-Africanism, once we are together, once we are away from colonial boundaries. That is not the way. Apart from the formula, which is Pan-Africanism, we need to come up with the solution that we can now implement within the guidelines of Pan-Africanism. And those solutions should be economic development. What is the economic system that we envisage as African people that we think can solve our problem? What is the economic system and what is the economic solution that we want to implement to solve our own economic problems? What is the educational system that we have to implement, in order to solve our educational challenges that we're facing today as African people? What is the health system solution that we must implement as African people? What is the political solution that we must implement? And all these solutions must be planned and implemented within the framework of Pan-Africanism. Unity for work. Not unity just for the sake of unity, but unity for work. In order to see the change taking place in our lives and taking place in Africa as we wish to see it taking place. So this is the time for revolutionary Pan-Africanism. If you want Africa to change, we call you to embrace the agenda of revolutionary Pan-Africanism so that we can be able to see Africa taking off from where it is now and moving forward. And when we talk about Pan-Africanism within the African Continental Unity Party, we look at three people very, very important in order to conclude my assessment. When we talk about Pan-Africanism, we focus on three people who lived at different time, but people we think are very important to our struggle of African liberation and emancipation. And these people are Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, and Sheikh Anta Diop. These are three figures within the field of Pan-Africanism who have brought great contribution to this struggle. Even though they have lived in different period, they had a different approach. When we talk about Marcus Garvey, he was pushing for economic Pan-Africanism. For Marcus Garvey, Africans must embrace economic development. African people must be entrepreneurial in order to deliver Africa, because it is a contradiction for you to be looking for freedom but wanting to be employed by the same people who took your freedom away, the same people who made you work for more than 400 years under the condition of slavery or colonialism. So for you to be free from those people, you must be your own boss. You must be your own employer. You must create job for yourself. You must create your own economy. That was the main focus of Marcus Garvey. And when we come to Kwame Nkrumah, he was pushing for political Pan-Africanism. For Kwame Nkrumah, African people must embrace political liberation for Africa to change. That is the reason why Kwame Nkrumah said when Ghana became independent, Kwame Nkrumah said that Ghana is not independent until whole Africa is independent. So for Kwame Nkrumah, political independence was very, very important. We shouldn't be the copycats of America. We shouldn't be a copycat of England, of France, of Portuguese, or of whatever who colonized us. We must, go away. We must actually go away from those colonial influence and then embrace our own political system, which is Pan-Africanism or political Pan-Africanism. And that was the only way we can free Africa, and that was the agenda of Kwame Nkrumah. Now, Sheikh Anta Diop, if you don't know him, he was a Senegalese scientist who actually conquered the world of Egyptology in Egypt. Before that, the Western world had a myth about the Egyptian civilization being a white civilization. They actually took us out of the Bible, out of literature, out of the world history to make us a people who are barbarians, people that have been served by the white religion or white civilization, so to say. It means white people came to take us out of our barbarism so that they can give us civilization, can give us religion and stuff like that. So we didn't have a history before that. But through the works of Sheikh Anta Diop, he was able to change that status quo. And today we know for the fact that we are older than the European history. We are older than any history you can talk about, because we are the ones who actually brought the first civilization to the world. Now, for Sheikh Anta Diop, Pan-Africanism should be scientific. For him, we must educate ourselves enough. We must gain all kind of knowledge that we need in order to rebuild Africa that we need, the Africa that we want. That is the reason why he even said that African children, you must build yourself with all kind of knowledge in order to redeem your world, in order to take back your inheritance from the hands of barbarians, European barbarians who have taken, possession of your inheritance, your historical inheritance, even your today's possession, which is the wealth of Africa, which is still under in the hands of our conquerors or our oppressors. So for Sheikh Anta Diop, African people must educate themselves. African people must study, must learn, must understand the world, how it works. Through knowledge, through scientific means, we will be able then to redeem Africa, to free Africa, and then to emancipate Africa. So we have three people here. Marcus Garvey about economic Pan-Africanism, Kwame Nkrumah about political Pan-Africanism, and Sheikh Anta Diop about scientific Pan-Africanism. The three of them make what we call the African Continental Unity Party today. This party is based on these three philosophies. The advantage is that these three philosophies lived in different eras or in different periods, but we are in this time, in the present time, trying to implement the three approaches that was undertaken by Kwame Nkrumah, Marcus Garvey, and Sheikh Anta Diop. That is why within the African Continental Unity Party, we have the Free-Minded Academy, which is, inclined on the scientific approach that we have to go with in order to embark in what is called scientific Pan-Africanism. Within the ACUP, we have what is called Ubuntu Group, which is a business fraction of ACUP, and Ubuntu aims at economic development of Africa. We go in our communities, we build enterprises, based on assets of our own people. We don't have to run to the bank to get loans in order to build our economies. We tap in the assets available within our economies, because in most cases, we see what we don't have in our communities. We see the lack of money. We see poverty, but we don't realize that apart from what we don't have, we also have certain things that if we know how to utilize them, we will be able to actually create enterprises that can free Africa from the conditions of underdevelopment where we are today. So we have Ubuntu Group for Economic Development. And within ACUP itself, we have political agenda, which is the African Continental Unity Party itself, which is a political party that aims for political Pan-Africanism. Means we want to see ACUP in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Congo, in Tanzania, Burkina Faso, Kenya, Dar es Salaam, everywhere in the continent. We want to see this political agenda being embraced by African people and then being worked for, and obviously being developed. So if you haven't been able to know or to get to know what is the African Continental Unity Party, we invite you to really get in touch with us to learn more about what we do and how we do, and also to bring your contribution, because we are in the period where every male and female who belongs to Africa must contribute to the agenda of African liberation and emancipation. We are no longer at that time where we have to leave this job in the hands of a tiny number of people to create the solution that we all want. No, the solution that we all want must be created by all of us. Therefore, we must all contribute. So if you know what is ACUP, but you don't actually, you are not involved in any activity, we are really pleading with you to join us in Action Team and let us work together for the liberation and emancipation of our mother continent, our motherland. Whether you are in the diaspora or on the continent, we all have the duty and the responsibility towards Africa, but most importantly, towards our common future, which is the future of glory, of power, and of excellency. But if you don't do that, we have to wait for another maybe 100, 200, or 300 years before we see the light of freedom and emancipation on African continent. So ACUP is on these three approaches when it comes to Pan-Africanism: economic Pan-Africanism, political Pan-Africanism, as well as scientific Pan-Africanism, because knowledge is potential power. Thank you very much for your time and for your dedication. It is always a pleasure and honor to interact with you on this weekly conversation that we have, where we talk about things related to, to our agenda, our struggle for freedom and emancipation within the agenda or within the struggle of the African Continental Unity Party. You can join as well. You can become member of this. You can become part of this agenda, and together we will be able to push this agenda forward and forward, even better, even more forward. It doesn't matter what you know, or what you don't know. All of us, we are not specialists in anything. We are trying to use what Angelo said, that Maya Angelou said, that do what you can do until you know better, and when you know better, do that even better. You see, you can start from wherever you are in your community, spreading the news of African Continental Unity Party, because this is the time to sell one of your shoes if you have two, to sell one of your trousers if you have two, and buy a sword, because it is time for revolution. And this revolution is not going to be done on streets about protest, about burning cars. No, this revolution is actually going to be about building cars and selling them. This revolution is going to be about building equipment and selling them instead of burning whatever that is there. This revolution is about creating jobs for ourselves and creating solutions for ourselves, instead of marching on the streets and demanding for other people to solve our own problems. Because there's no European solution to African problem. There is no Chinese solution to African problem. Anything that must be done for us must be done by us as African people. In other words, we must be always in the forefront of the struggle of anything that needs to be done for Africa to be freed and Africa to be emancipated. Peace and power, peace and blessing, and peace and decolonization. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Please share the video, like it. Is a way you can support what we do and make our message known to the public. Thank you very much. Until then.